Howdy, folks. Craig Lavati here with the Houston Museum of Natural Science and the Beyond Bones podcast. Today, we're talking to two of our new friends from the Houston Botanic Garden. It's 132 acres nestled just south of downtown, of plants and wildlife and every other thing you can imagine here in Houston. Let's check it out. Howdy, folks. Craig Lavati here with the Houston Museum of Natural Science. This is, of course, the HMNS Beyond Bones podcast, now available on all of your favorite podcast apps, including that one and maybe that one. We have to search on that one just yet. We're not sure. And also on YouTube. A lot of people like to watch us on YouTube. They like to hear the faces and see the voices, I guess. I said that wrong. Anyway, Kat, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you, Craig? I'm at home today.
We're both at home. I'm always at home, but you're at home. Usually you're in the office in your underground lair.
It's my cat cave.
The cat cave. The, what would you call that? Cougar den?
Oh, gosh, I hope not.
I don't. Yes. Johnny, delete that. No, don't. It's funny. And you have a sarcophagus behind you.
I do. It's a hercophagus.
A hercophagus.
It's a girl.
And then a scolophagus.
It's not real. It's a bone clone.
Why can't it be real?
Because that's creepy. I wouldn't have that in my home.
When's your birthday?
September.
Okay, I'm going to get you a real human skull for your birthday. Ooh. All right. Today's episode is very cool. They're all very cool. They're all very special. But today we're talking to two of our friends from the Houston Botanic Garden. Claudia G. Vassar is the president of the garden. She's the president of the garden. And Dr. Fran Della Mota, he is the director of horticulture out there. And guys, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having us. This is very exciting.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us, for sure.
Yeah, I've always known about you guys, obviously, because you opened up in September 2020. You were one of the first big Houston attractions that opened during COVID, I guess. Like you kind of like blossomed, we'll use the parlance, you blossomed and bloomed during COVID. And that couldn't have been an easy thing. But I know you guys have been killing it out there, not literally the plants, but you've been killing it with attendance wise too. So if people haven't heard of Houston Botanic Garden, exactly what is it?
I like to think of us sort of as the newest museum of natural science in a way.
Literal natural science.
Yeah, exactly.
Your things are living.
Right. So we're a museum for plants, this incredibly beautiful garden that builds on this history of botanic gardens across the globe that are wonderful places to study and learn about plants, where we hope that people deepen their appreciation for plants and become stewards of this planet that we call our home.
And go ahead.
That's awesome. And it's funny because I always see things through the lens of history or anthropology, because that's my specialty. And when I was looking at your place, it brought to mind like the history of botanical gardens in the first place, just the ancient history, Persian, and then how, it spread to Europe, and then from Europe, here to the United States. And just, it has such a rich, deep history.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is to see how these institutions have changed over time. So, botanic gardens got their start. I mean, there's, a lot of different gardens that contributed to it, but there were some physic gardens that started out of universities where doctors were studying plants to understand their pharmaceutical benefits. So this is where botany originated. They were organizing plants by their characteristics. And Fran, I'm sure we'll go into more details around that. And then when the United Kingdom started conquering the world, they were sending botanists on a lot of their excursions. So they're interested in studying plants. They also collected them and then propagated them. Some of it was for economic purposes. Some of it was for scientific exploration. So then you had these botanic gardens, many connected to either governments or universities throughout the world. when we started seeing the destruction of the rainforests, gardens were already had greenhouses and were in the business of learning how to study plants and protect them and cultivate them. And so Botanic Gardens is where, when we thought we were losing all of this biodiversity with the destruction of the rainforest, they started really participating a lot in the conservation movements. And then when you got into the 21st century, you had these scientists going to Botanic Gardens and learning and studying about plants, but we really realized that if we were going to protect plants across the world, that can't just be the scientists that are participating in this endeavor. We all had to play a part. And so Botanic Gardens really started increasing their educational programming as well. And so, very similar to a lot of our indoor museum friends, we have to start translating the work that we are doing to how the public can engage as well.
Bring them on board as like citizen scientists and make them part of the solution and have an investment, psychologically or internally in preserving and making the planet better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a similar kind of like idea as zoos as well, right? So they're you get to see these really interesting and different animals, and that's the same thing in Botanic Gardens. So like the Houston Zoo has a see them, save them. It's the same idea that, right. We're a way to get the public to see these really cool things that are happening and really start to appreciate and see what their role is in making sure that we continue to have this biodiversity that's so important for human survival.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Dr. Fran, as the director of horticulture over there, what do you do? What's your day to day? I guess because there's a lot of plants there.
So there's really a lot involved. So linking to what Claudia just mentioned, so there's the part of being a museum, that is, we need to track where all our plants come from, where they go into the garden. There's the purpose of that plant in the garden. All of the collections have to have a story, to tell a story. Part of that educational goal, right, is to why do we have this plant in the garden and why is it relevant for science and also for humans as well? What is the cultural connection of those plants to us? And in a place like Houston that has people really from all over the place, that is a very important aspect of what we do, right? Why certain plant is important to Latin American communities or Asian communities. There's always such a deep connection between plants and our culture, because mostly through food, but not only through food, right? And this is very, very important in any botanical collection, really.
Yeah,
sorry.
I was going to say, yeah, you hit that right there too. Like there's an emotional connection to some of these plants too. I know that may sound cheesy for you guys out there listening, but it is true. Like there are certain plants that you see and that takes you back to a certain time and place.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes. There's always, I think every person probably has some kind of connection to a plant because it brings memories from childhood, or it brings memories from maybe even a past job that they had or a certain vacation. It's really, really an important component to our lives, so much more than we notice on our day-to-day lives, right?
One of the interesting things about the Houston Botanic Gardens is that I was trying to explain to somebody exactly where you guys are located, and you guys are near I-45 in the Park Place neighborhood. And when my grandparents came to Houston initially, they settled in that area. So that area has always had, kind of a soft spot in my heart, because you guys are right near Hobby Airport, and it's over 130 acres?
That's right. About 132 acres.
Yeah, and that's not easy to come by, that kind of acreage in Houston, as we know now.
Right. It's a really beautiful site. So Sims Bio the original Sims actually kind of runs around the north part of the garden, and you cross over the bio as one of your first experiences as you come to enter into the garden. And then Sims was channelized in order to help with some of the resiliency, and cuts through the middle of the garden. So we actually have a roughly 60-acre island, which is a really great thing for Houston, and our relationship between plants and water and the importance of bios to our city gets to be a real central feature of the garden. And then our south gardens are on the other side, where we have our family garden and lots of opportunity, our community garden, and lots of opportunities for walking and intersecting with nature. It's a really beautiful site.
I was going to say too, Dr. Fran, like when you walk in there, you don't feel like you're, near I-45. You don't feel like you're right near, which is just, there's a lot of industrial sites out there too. You don't feel like you're anywhere else.
It's a green space. Yep.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. So that's something, as a newcomer to Houston myself, I came to Houston in May. I'm originally from Madrid, Spain. That is something that I very much appreciate on my daily time here in the garden, is that is almost a rest for the mind and the soul from the rest of Houston. As they say, there's a lot of oil refineries around, a lot of built structures, a lot of highways. But when you're in the garden, it really feels like an oasis within the city. All the trees, all the views. There's always a view that I really enjoy when you cross the bayou. There's one of the few places, I think, in this part of downtown Houston, really, that you can look to the east and not see any built infrastructure at all. You just see the bayou and you see the trees and the plants. And that is an asset in itself, for sure, beyond all the value of the botanical collections.
I've also, it's almost like a sound barrier too, because the freeway is not that close, but it's close, and obviously I-45, if you guys know, that's not a fun drive. And you guys are
like carpet. They absorb sound.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Right. Trees have a lot of functions, for sure, in urban ecosystems, right? And of course, mitigating flood because of water infiltration into the soil and interception in the canopies, but certainly also blocking noise, right?
Yeah.
And you can tell, even in winter, when some of our trees lose the leaves, or if you think of your neighborhood too, noises are more apparent at the time of the year that they are in summer, when everything is lived out and everything is dense. So absolutely, that is a really great benefit from vegetation.
As a professional horticulture, is it horticulturalist?
Horticulturist.
It's just a strange word to say in the middle of the day. What were some of the challenges of planting things for the garden in Houston?
I think the number one is climate. Houston has a very unique climate in which, so for 2/3 of the year is a tropical climate, basically very hot, very humid, which there are a lot of plants in the world that like that environment, but also winter, every now and then you do have a cold enough period that can do a lot of damage to those tropical plants. So balancing that very hot, very long summer with the occasionally cold time in winter is probably the most challenging for the collection. Most of those tropical plants, when sized adequately, and they can take some of that cold, and then even if the leaves are damaged, they can come back from the roots, as it happened, for example, last year, right, with the very strong freeze in February 2021. A lot of the plants were able to come back. But I think that it's really the main challenge, combining those two things. We are too hot to grow the plants that will take the cold or the very severe cold, but then we're also too cold for growing a straight out tropical plants like they would do, for example, in Miami, right?
Welcome.
And also the way our weather patterns are very chaotic sometimes, meaning it can be 80 degrees like it was on Monday, right? Or 84 almost. And tonight is going to be in the 40s or even in the 30s. That is almost just as challenging, because plants that are supposed to be dormant in winter are not, because they are growing and they're actively growing in winter. And that is part of the lack of cold hardiness that a lot of the plants in the Houston area may have. Those plants could be perfectly cold hardy in other parts of the country where there's a continuous winter that is more homogeneous in the temperature range, where it doesn't get very warm throughout the winter. But when you have weeks of heat, then the plant gets going thinking that winter is gone,
right?
It's cold again, and then that cold hardiness is lost through that period, because the plant is actively growing. instead of being dormant as it is supposed to in winter.
They get so confused here. So we always like talk about the confused plants.
Exactly what I
I
was
think
gonna
it's spring,
say.
but then it's not.
My mums were very confused this fall. They were like, flowers? Oh no, it's hot. Flowers?
Right.
They were-
Absolutely. Yeah.
sure.
So do you have you got it? I haven't paid attention, but have you guys had to weather any really bad floods out there yet?
We haven't. So we're really fortunate. Even during Hurricane Harvey, Houston's sort of epic flood, Sims Bio was the only bio that did not have overbank flooding,
Oh, wow.
which is probably attributable to a number of things. It's a small watershed. It's not as densely developed as some other parts of town. And so we're super grateful to be in this location because we feel like we're very well protected from flooding.
What's go ahead, Kat, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Just while we were on the water topic, I wanted to ask a question. So there's lots of really unique ways of farming or growing things. Do y'all also do like edible, harvestable type spaces as well, correct?
Mhm.
So
Right.
like I'm again, my little history view or history lens that I'm always going to, like, do you guys have anything that's based on maybe Central South American, like the Chinampas or anything like that? Because we do have so much water or areas, or anything maybe in the works for something like that? Like the islands the Aztecs kind of used to grow their plants?
Yeah, one second. Farron, do you want to?
So,
I'm just noticing I have a glare.
we do have a culinary garden here as part of our collections, and we grow plants from basically all over the world, which have a edible or medicinal value to humans somewhere on the planet. And we do include a lot of Central and South American plants in there. I don't think we have anything that is specifically what you're mentioning on those sorts of Aztec structures, but we do have a lot of plants that are of very historical and cultural value for Central and South American communities, for sure.
Yeah, we do have a class coming up related to Aztec growing and corn and the importance of that, and it'll be related to the Aztec New Year. As Fran was sort of describing the importance of different plants throughout history, what really informed our designers when they were thinking about how to present the different plants in the gardens, as well as which plants to include. So there have been a number of plants that have really changed the course of human history in very important ways. And the Aztecs and some of their growing techniques are things that we will be able to show, as well as discuss and talk about and celebrate the importance of different Aztec plants.
I'm gonna have to come take that class, I think. That sounds fascinating, because corn, like you said, is a game changer. It's a world changer, like potatoes or some of the other crops as well. Very cool.
How, speaking of the Park Place neighborhood over there, how has the neighborhood responded to you guys? Are you seeing a lot of curious natives, I guess, coming through there?
So the neighborhood is really a great support for us. We get a lot of our regular visitors who they have this beautiful place that they can come on a regular basis and do their exercise and walking. We have one neighbor who is almost like our historian. He doesn't know it, but he takes photos pretty much every day that he comes out, which is most days of the week. And so we get to see how the plants and gardens are changing over time through his photography. And he does it as for fun and for exercise. We have a lot of volunteers that come from the neighborhood, and that has been really wonderful for us, because Botanic Gardens, we can't do the work that we do without the support of volunteers. And so to have people from the neighborhood actively participate in that way is really tremendous. So, we have one person who actually just works in the office on a regular basis, in addition to people that are outside in the gardens. So we're really grateful to the support of the neighborhood. I think it's a part of town that doesn't have a lot of cultural assets. It doesn't have a lot of the type of programming and things that we can do, opportunities for scout groups to come and volunteer, or school groups. There just isn't a lot of other things in this area. And so I think that has been a really wonderful thing for us to, we're not competing with a whole bunch of others in the area for engagement with the community.
What was there before? I mean, I'm a lifelong Houstonian, but I can't remember what was there before.
It was a municipal golf course. So it was one of the city's golf courses that, Gus Wortham, sort of north of us, is another municipal golf course that's really close. That one was probably utilized a lot more. So people, when they think of golf courses in this part of town, everyone thinks of Gus Wortham. People didn't really remember that this one existed. So it was a city golf course, and the city is a tremendous partner. When the nonprofit was looking for a place to have 100 acres within the city in order to be able to grow into what they knew the Botanic Garden could be for the city. The city was the one who said, let's take this golf course that doesn't have a lot of people using it and transform it into a Botanic Garden. And we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without the partnership with the city for the land.
I was going to say, I respect golfers, but some of that land is so pretty and it's so sad sometimes that it's just used for just guys putting balls in holes. Sometimes if you wish that some of that stuff could be, but I'm glad that you guys were able to, rehab that land and make it for something for everybody.
Yeah, it turned out to be a win-win because the city also was able to get people to invest in Gus Wortham. So that municipal course is a much better facility now for golfers, and we have a Botanic Garden as well. So I think it's a real win-win for the city.
There's also a really cool public library not too far away from over there that I went. Library cardigan for the first time in like 30 years, I think. And it was fun. I went to the garden and I went to the library. It was a very fun Monday.
It's fantastic. That's where I have all my kids' books picked up also. And we've done programs with them too. So they'll, they have done readings, and we're looking forward to having, when I grew up, it was called the Bookmobile. I understand it has a different name now.
Yes.
So out front, so that's
that's a great collaboration between the gardens and the library, especially since the university tie-in in the historical sense and stuff like that. That's an amazing tie-in, for sure.
You're not too
we're
far
so
away.
Lucky.
You're not too far away from Forest Park, Lawndale either, which is one of the most historic cemeteries in the city too.
Yeah, we'll have to try to figure out what that collaboration is. If you have any ideas, Craig, let us know.
I don't know. Can you get buried? I was going to say this is a cat question, but can you get buried?
I'm the deaf person.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Can you get buried at the Botanic Garden on purpose?
We probably won't be doing that, although there are initiatives for people to be buried and to feed a tree. So want to have that connection.
Well, in the history of the first cemeteries, it being green spaces, so to speak, in peaceful places, for sure, there's definitely at least a crossover tie-in, but I can't imagine that they would be burying people anytime soon. There's a lot.
We found a way to make this morbid. We did. We really did. Dr. Fraud was on a good path. Claudia was on a good path, and then leave it to me and Kat to go, what about dead bodies? How can we include dead bodies?
This time. It wasn't even my fault this time. Usually I steer it that way.
Yeah, that's true.
This time it was you. Yep.
So, Dr. Fraud, how do you become a director of horticulture? What's the career track there?
So, well, you could have different ways of reaching to that position. In my case, it comes through always having had a passion for plants and really loving collecting plants. The rarer, the better. Typically, most of the people who get into this position would first do a bachelor's in horticulture, and then often also a master's in horticulture, plant science, forestry, biology sometimes, any kind of plant-related topic. And then, as I say, it's very important, I think, to have that overarching knowledge of not just plants themselves, but also soils and ecosystems and how it all comes together, and what's the purpose of collecting, not just for the sake of beauty and having that rarity, which is super cool and really interesting to me, but also what is the value of having that plant in the collection? What is the story that we're telling with that plant? And that is always very attractive, I think, to a lot of folks who are into plants. often the reason why plants are meaningful to us is not just the plant itself, which, as I say, they often are very interesting because of the flowers or the bark or certain growth characteristics, but also because of the story behind it. Many of them have interesting collection stories behind them. A lot of the plants today in gardens are, or some of them, are plants that were thought to be extinct and then recently found to be alive in China or in Australia. For example, in the 1940s with Dawn redwood, until then it was just known as a fossil, and then it was found alive in China, or Wollemi pine, Wollemia nobilis, which was found in 1994 in a ravine in Australia, and until then only known to us as a fossil as well. So all those stories behind the plants really bring them to life and really help us at Botanical Gardens tell that story to the greater public that comes to see those plants and all that relevance. I think it all comes, just like when they tell you a story as a kid, right? It has to have a theme and it has to have a thread to be attractive, not just the facts, but also the whole connection. And I think that, at least for me, it's always been really, really relevant. I got into plants through natural history so much more than through plants themselves, because the books that I started to read when I was a kid on plants were talking about trees, but with a natural history point of view. The person that wrote some of those books that I read was not a plant person, it was a writer. And I think being more of a story really helped me get into the world of plants from early on. And I think that's probably shared with many people who get into horticulture at the botanical garden level.
Because when it comes to the evolutionary and the fossil record, maybe Kat can elaborate on this too. We sort of leave behind the plants and the foliage, as it were. We kind of leave that stuff behind for dinosaur fossils and things like that, but they coexisted next to each other, and they were just as important to getting to where we are now.
Probably more important, actually. Without the plants first being there and changing and evolving, we wouldn't have had these, the reptiles and other species being able to evolve. They were plant dependent, really, in many cases, for the environment and for their food. For the biodiversity is not completely dependent on plants, but plants are such a huge part of that. I couldn't help thinking of the museum the whole time you were talking, because you could have just inserted some of these words in for what you were saying. And I was like, yeah, it's exactly right. It's a story. It's not about treasure hunting. It's about telling, the important story through artifacts or specimens, or in your case, plants, which is pretty cool. Reminds me of the early scientists, the cabinet of curiosities type thing. So.
I think it ties a little bit to, as you mentioned, early scientists that were a little bit not just botanists or not just medical doctors or not just geographers, but were a little bit of all of that. Generalists. Because it all was part of acquiring that knowledge and putting the story together. Why was it relevant to us?
And making those connections between things that seem disparate, that don't seem connected, but are in different ways. And I think that was the whole idea in the beginning.
You mean like a root system, Kat?
Oh my gosh, that's deep. Yes, Craig. Actually, yes. You're right. 100%.
So, Claudia, you brought up photographers. Do you have a lot of people that come in there and take photos?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So everything from just regular visitors who are enjoying, taking pictures of where they've been and what they're doing, to professional photographers, people having photo shoots done there for senior pictures or for
Instagram,
engagement photos. All of that is a very photographable place.
You get a lot of the influencers just like we do.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, we do. I mean, and
the Cockerel Butterfly Center is just like pops off for that. So if you're taking some of the heat from off of us, that's good.
Happy to do it.
We're happy to. We love our influencers, but yes, it is. I can only imagine, that you have a few of the crowds that are there for, the botanical aspect, but then also to, doing it for the gram. me and Johnny's silent right now, but last week we went on a birding trip down in the Rio Grande Valley. And it was a lot of people taking pictures of birds like Johnny. And we were doing we'll talk about that on another show. But I was really excited to find two guys at one of these parks we were at that were actually taking pictures of flowers and small, like, just that look, they could have, to the untrained eye, Dr. Fromm, they would have been weeds, but they were not weeds. They were, something really special. And I was really excited to see that next to the birders, there was people there with these macro lenses that were just like getting the tiniest flower they could in their camera. And you can be surprised too, even with a regular smartphone, you can really get great photos of plants. So it was, and some of them look so alien and so foreign to us as well. And it just, yeah, I can definitely see why you would get a doctorate in that. I can't even, what I guess looking forward, climate change, we'll bring that up. How is that going to affect your job?
Right. So that's something really important in planning the collections, and also thinking of botanical gardens as repository of plant species as well. It's really like any other museum. That gives you the opportunity of have plant material from different species that may be endangered in their natural areas. And that could help restore some populations in the future if those populations in the natural area are under a stronger threat because of climate change, for example. And also, it gives a focus to the collection as well as being a place for research and to see, okay, if Houston's climate is going to expected to be warmer, more humid, or drier in the future, what are the plants that are going to be a major component of the landscape for us 50 years from now, 100 years from now? And so then it's an option, it's a really a good place to test new species that are currently being grown at the large here in the Houston area that you can test to inform the industry into, okay, these are probably pretty good candidates for us in the next few years for drought tolerance or flooding tolerance, heat tolerance. They also, a big issue with importing new plants into an environment is invasiveness.
Right.
So testing that, okay, how many seedlings are coming up based on that new introduction? What is the potential invasive potential of a new introduction? I think that's something very, very important, especially in a climate like Houston's that have such a long growing season that everything grows really fast. Testing for invasiveness is something that we can also provide the industry with a lot of information on what to grow and what not to grow with new introductions.
And we're such an international city too. Yeah. And that you get things from all over. Go ahead, Kat.
Sorry, we had a history of that too, if I'm not mistaken, with the Atwater prairie chicken. Wasn't it an invasive species, some type of plant or tree? I think it was tallow maybe that they imported, and it really destroyed that entire population. And I don't, obviously they didn't do it on purpose, but even the smallest thing, if it's not managed right or not thought about, can be a problem. And
so
you
really
guys,
the eastern and southern United States have a long history of plant invasive problems because of it's linked to both the horticultural industry wanted to have the next really cool plant and also trying to solve certain problems, sometimes erosion control. Right. We have this really fast growing plant that can hold soil, like thinking of kudzu, or also commercially plants for certain crops as well can escape cultivation. Sure. And because of that, we have a great number of plants, also animals, right, that are invasive in this area and that are now a very, very high economical cost to manage. That's really the story behind invasiveness is the economical cost and the ecological cost because of ecosystems lost.
And those are intertwined.
Right, they're very intertwined for sure.
Right.
And that's really the one of the things that we can really focus now in the future on those things as well.
So speaking of plants, obviously with plants, you get bugs. What's the bug situation at the Botanic Garden?
So that's something that I think is a great potential for gardens to teach the community the importance of insects. And also, it'll link a little bit, and I'll touch that in a minute, with invasive species. So creating an ecosystem, even in your own backyard, that can promote a lot of different insect or invertebrate species in your garden, and why it is relevant for the whole functioning of the ecosystem by having the right plants that attract pollinators. Of course, we know that a lot of the crops that we grow for feeding the entire planet are dependent on bees pollinating those crops. If we don't have that, think of apples, pears, a lot of the fruits, right, are bee pollinated, then those crops are gone. Maintaining a healthy population of pollinators is very, very relevant for the future of our economy, especially thinking of food. And at the same time, insects also often get imported, unfortunately, for the wrong reasons, or even unintentionally, right? And now something that is going to be very relevant in Texas in the next few years, for example, is emerald ash borer, which is it's a beetle that is native in China, in Asia, and it came into the U.S. in wooden pallets, in shipping crates into the Great Lakes area, and from there, over the past years, it's been expanding into the rest of the U.S., and it's basically been killing all the ash trees, fractions, in its way. It just recently made it to Northeast Texas, so we can expect in the next few years that the ash trees in Houston will start to die because of these beetle feeding. The larvae of the beetle feeds directly under the bark of the tree and eventually kills it, unless you treat it. So that's going to be a really big issue, thinking of urban forestry and tree canopy here in the Houston area. What is going to be the impact of emerald ash borer? We don't have as many ash trees really in Houston as other parts of the US, but there are still certain areas that do have large trees already, and that is certainly going to have an impact in the city.
And what kind of beetle again? I'm so sorry, I didn't.
Emerald ash borer.
Okay. Okay.
It's a beautiful creature. I mean, it's very glossy, brilliant green. That's why the name emerald. So it's a gorgeous creature, but of course, for the ash trees outside of its native range, is really, really detrimental.
One of my memories from gardening, I don't have very many because I'm not very talented, but my great aunt was, and I used to go around with a can full of, I think, kerosene and knock beetles that were invasive from the flowers into the can. And we would keep it like that was my job.
So that was probably Japanese beetle.
That's exactly what they were.
Right, which feed on the petals, especially on roses and things like that, peonies. They really love those.
Yep.
And I remember with my PhD advisor having a very interesting story on that, because I also remember of my internship at the Holden Arboretum now, many years ago. We were picking the beetles off the roses, right? You go with a glass or a can that has soapy water in it, and then you drop them in it. But there are some of them that actually fly off the flower. So the defense mechanism of these beetles is that the moment you try to grab them, they drop dead. They pretend that they're dead, and they just let themselves drop to the ground so that they escape, so that you can actually grab them. And that's why we were putting them into the bucket. But some of them do fly instead of dropping, pretending that they are dead. And we are actually unintentionally, with our horticultural practice of picking the ones that drop, selecting for the ones that fly off the flower. So eventually, once we pick all the ones that drop, we're just leaving the ones that fly off. Eventually, the method of control of picking them off the flowers is not going to work anymore, because the moment you approach the flower, they're all going to fly off the flower.
That's so amazing. Like, we're affecting evolution in a very short period of time by doing things like that. That's pretty fascinating.
I think going back to Kat, how you're talking about everything being connected, I think we oftentimes don't make those connections and realize how small things that we do have this impact because of how connected they are. And while we don't have those beautiful bugs at the garden, Craig, we do have lots of beautiful bugs at the garden. I mean, what is really amazing to me is every time that you walk through, the number of different dragonflies and bees and butterflies that you will see. And then, you know, Kat's kind of again talking about how all of these ecosystems are, you know, fragile webs of how everything is connected. So many of our butterflies, only feed off of a single type of plant because they've sort of evolved together. And then, those caterpillars might be the sole source of food for a certain type of bird. And so it's really important for us to maintain all of this biodiversity because it has these ripple effects. I mean, you're talking about how you can see through history, how the evolution of so many animals happened because of changes in the plants. That's a large part of why we do what we do.
I wonder if any of our butterflies escape and make it down there to you guys.
They do not. They do not. We have a very strict protocol.
I know. But I just like to imagine. I like to imagine one flying out and going, "I'm going to go to the Botanic Garden. I've heard good things."
No. They have to stay put or they go to butterfly jail.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, or then you'll end up getting taken by a toddler in your mouth or something. I've seen that happen. So no, it's we are definitely very plant and bug oriented at the museum. So it was a match made in heaven for us to join here on the podcast today. Is there anything special going on? Well, there's always something special going on in the Botanic Garden. What do you have coming up in the next few weeks that people should boogie down there for?
Absolutely. So please check out our website, www.hbg.org. We always have a host of education classes, wellness classes, arts, different ways for people to connect with plants. A couple of highlight things that are coming up. We'll do a trail mixology event where people will get to enjoy the wonderful benefits of walking through nature and all of the incredible things that does for us, while at the same time learning what plants they can add to their cocktails and mocktails and enjoy consuming different botanicals as well. We have a really great partnership with Methodist for health. Internally, we're calling it a Symposia Fest, where it'll be both a learning, but then also lots of ways to engage in health and nature together and what that relationship is, coming up in May. And then a fun festival on bananas coming up in June. Bananas are just a really interesting and incredible, both what that plant and fruit has been in different cuisines and cultures around the world, but really interesting plants as well. And we have a great collection of them at the garden. So we'll be celebrating all things bananas as well.
Wow. So banana daiquiris, banana splits, banana everything. Okay. Do you have bananas there growing?
We do have bananas in our tropical garden, which, Fran can talk a lot more about the musa and different species that we have as a not PhD in horticulture or plant related science.
So can people pick them?
We haven't done that yet.
Yeah, okay.
But they're really incredible plants. After the freeze that happened last year, it was really the indicator of the resiliency of plants for me, because every 2 days our banana plants just grew tremendously. And to watch them recover was really spectacular. So it's really fun to see how plants can be really resilient.
And if you really want to test the resiliency of plants, you can send them to my patio. It is a survival of the fittest environment.
Well, part of gardening and horticulture is losing plants. That's just part of it.
It's evolution. It's what it is.
It happens as a living museum. That's just part of what happens. And I will say, that's actually one of the things that has made coming to the Botanic Garden a really incredible experience for me, because we're a part of this Botanic Garden network across the world. And because you never know if your garden might have some kind of a plague, or, whether it's an insect or a disease or a weather event, gardens tend to back up their collections with other gardens. So there's just incredible sharing that happens. So we're working together to research and share with one another, and participating in that together, and just having this wonderful collaboration of botanic gardens across the world is really spectacular.
That is so cool. And science is like that too. Science, hopefully at its best, is collaborative, right? And it's supposed to be about the end result, and it's supposed to be about, furthering, whichever discipline or all of them. That is cool. Very cool.
Guys, thank you so much for jumping on here with us. Claudia, thank you for taking time out of your day. Dr. Fran, thank you as well. I'll let you guys get back out there and do the. Are you actually at the office right now?
I'm in the office. Yeah.
Okay, so you can just change your clothes or wear your suit out there and then go out there and check out. Do you walk around in a suit, or do you usually have like a horticulture costume?
Depends on what I'm going to do, right? If it's just taking on things, I can be as I am right now. Or if I'm going to be working in the garden like I did yesterday, then certainly, right, I have more appropriate attire. Yeah,
because today is probably not a real fun day to be in the garden because it's kind of
cold quickly today.
Yeah,
it's dropping fast.
I'm sure it's summertime. Wait, this will be your second summer here in Houston, right?
It will be starting my second summer, right? I arrived in May, so yeah. Awesome.
It's going to get nice and steamy out in the garden over there. Guys, go check out the Houston Botanic Garden. It is south of downtown. You can't miss it. 132 acres. It's a garden. You can't miss it. It's fun. It's great. Go out there, walk around, get some exercise, and live among not live among them.
Grow
your knowledge of plants at the Houston Botanic Garden. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you. See you at the garden.